Hello everyone, I'm Valerie and I'm here with Karen Willey, who's going to be talking about climate change communication, educating us all on how to more effectively communicate climate change to our friends and neighbors. Climate change is really important for us as native plant enthusiasts because it's affecting currently our ecosystems that are home to our native plants and native plant communities. So really excited to have Karen on. Our website has transitioned, so just a bit of news. Our website has transitioned. There are some bugs, so please feel free to report those to me or Shirley. I'm communications@fnps.org. Thank you everyone who's been helping us out with Dice Your Andrew monitoring. Some of them are here. Mary and Anna are here watching right now. And next week's Lunch and Learn is with Tom Palmer on a natural history of Lake Blue Scrub. So Tom was out helping us monitor Dice Your Andrew yesterday, and he has been integral in cleaning up Lake Blue Scrub and getting it better managed. And there's actually a work day tomorrow at Lake Blue Scrub for Heartland chapter members. So without further ado, I will introduce Karen Willey. Go ahead, Karen.
Okay. So should I start my screen?
Yes, start sharing your screen.
Okay, here we go. Share, here we go. All right. You. Yeah. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. I'm glad to be here. I'm Karen Willey. I'm the Education Director for NNOCCI chapter, which we're in Manatee, Sarasota, DeSoto, and Hardee counties down in Southwest Florida. I'm speaking to you today with my climate change hat on. I am part of the National Network for Ocean and Climate Change Interpretation. And we call ourselves NNOCCI. And we are a network of individuals and organizations of informal science education, scientists and social scientists. And we are committed to shaping the discourse around climate change to be solutions-focused, positive, and civic-minded, so part of the community. And we are a group of 170 institutions nationwide in 38 states and growing. So we are currently providing trainings online. So talking about climate change, concern for our climate is normal. And this is was updated by Yale Climate Communication in April of this year. 73% of Americans, and I'm sure 100% of you on our call today, are certain that climate change is happening now. But only a small portion of us, about 36%, are even talking about it. And not talking about it much. So our mission at NNOCCI is to get more folks talking about climate change, because the more we talk about it, the more it's going to become mainstream and the more likely things are going to change. So we need committed and engaged community leaders. So how do we do this? We use a process called strategic framing. It's based on some social science research, and it's to help us bridge the gap between the scientist and public. And so we want to help the public understand and show them that they can be part of the solution. So at the I'm going to go over some of the very basics of strategic framing in this quick webinar. But there's a actual 4 to 6 hour workshop you can go through to really learn, take a deep dive into it. So first thing we want to do is agree to a common vocabulary. Climate change is the way we want to talk about it. A lot of folks are talking about it as global warming, and we've moved from that because global warming talks specifically about temperature, but there's so much else involved with climate change. So let's look at that. It's all of these things changing due to weather conditions. So weather is a snapshot. It's what's happening outside your window right now. where climate is trends over 30 years, and it takes into consideration all of these things: temperature, precipitation, humidity, wind, air pressure. And again, it's averages over time and over large areas. So we talk about climate as regional, not just in a city itself. So I'm just going to go briefly over the science because I think everyone here understands it. But basically, when we burn fossil fuels such as coal, oil, and natural gas, we add more and more carbon dioxide up into the atmosphere. And this buildup of carbon dioxide acts as a heat trapping blanket around the Earth. And this disrupts the climate. Also, because the air is getting warmer, the oceans are getting warmer, and that's basic equilibrium. So we're changing the system not only in the air, but in the oceans. And we live on this beautiful planet with this thin layer of atmosphere that protects us. And so we often get the argument, well, isn't it natural to have a carbon dioxide layer? And yes, it absolutely is. We have what we call regular versus rampant carbon dioxide. So regular carbon dioxide is created by normal life processes. I breathe out carbon dioxide, the plants breathe it in. So that's regular. That's the regular carbon dioxide cycle. But rampant comes when we burn fossil fuels for energy. And we need to reduce this rampant carbon dioxide because it's thickening that blanket and it's getting out of control, as we're seeing in the news more and more. So here's the regular versus rampant. This comes directly from the International Planet on Climate Change international panel. So here's regular with more heat getting out. And then as we burn fossil fuels, we're thickening this carbon dioxide and less heat is escaping into space, and it's creating these effects. So how do we talk about this? The main thing, these are three very easy things to understand. Find common ground with whoever you're speaking to. Talk in a reasonable tone. Don't get excited, don't get angry. Tone is really important. It establishes the issue as reasonable and that anybody can understand it, not just those who already agree with a certain point of view. So we don't want to invoke crisis, and we're seeing crisis all over the news because it's what sells newspapers, I believe. And we're then evoking this flight or fight. We have to combat climate change. It's not giving us hope. So it's also creating a lot of effort and a lot of energy, and it's wearing folks down. So we have to understand that our work is sustainable. We need to sustain ourselves doing this hard work, and we don't want to invoke that crisis. Also, people think it's too big, so why bother? And we want to engage them. So tone is very important, and keeping it reasonable and not crisis. We don't want to make it an argument. We just want to talk clearly. So at NNOCCI, we have a big toolbox, and it's broken into 3 different sections. And the first section here on the left is, why does this matter to society? And in order to make it matter to someone, you need to engage a value. And these 2 values are what the social scientists have come up with as that resonate most with the American audience. So the communication was done with a big cross section of Americans. So we can say this for certain for us. So responsible management and protection are the 2 values. And I'm going to put a short plug in for if you want to take a beginner course, we have these great reframe cards. So they are actually cheat sheets for each of these elements in our toolbox. And so protection, why does it matter and why is it at stake? We must protect people and places from being harmed by the issues facing our environment. Very basic. And on responsible management, we're telling the story that taking practical, common sense steps to address problems facing our environment today is in the best interest of future generations. So that really gets folks when you're talking about, yeah, we got to protect these resources for our future, for our kids and our grandkids. So that's why it matters. But how does it work? And I just read to you earlier our two most basic metaphors. So there are 4 metaphors that help us to talk and explain the science around climate change. The heat trapping blanket, which when we burn fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas, we're adding this excess carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which is creating a heat trapping blanket around the Earth, and it's making our environment, it's changing our environment. Regular versus rampant carbon dioxide. I explained that as well. 2 other metaphors to help. Climate's heart. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Climate's heart talks about the ocean currents, and it's really connects the ocean to the climate, and that's really an important connection. So just as your heart circulates blood and regulates your body temperature, the ocean controls the circulation of heat and moisture throughout the climate system. So we need to, just as we need to protect our heart to keep our bodies healthy, we need to protect the ocean's heart, which is climate's heart. So that's a really good one. And also osteoporosis of the sea is trying to explain ocean acidification. This one is kind of tricky, and I don't use it much because I'm not as familiar with it. But basically what it says is the ocean acidification changes the chemistry of the ocean and causes osteoporosis of the sea, which prevents animals at the bottom of the food chain from building and maintaining their protective shells that they need to survive. So this metaphor, osteoporosis of the sea, is only it's only as good as you can only use it with an audience that might understand osteoporosis. So I probably would not use this with my middle school group that I'm talking to because they're not really aware of osteoporosis. But if I'm talking to a Sierra Club group, there's a lot of older people who are aware. So these are tools, and they don't all have to be used, but those first 2, regular versus rampant and heat trapping blanket, are really important. And then we've got community level solutions. Well, I'm going to go into those a little later because I want to just go over a few of the things that are changing, shifting back to the science here for a minute, along with temperature, right? We talked about how climate change is temperature, precipitation, air pressure, wind over time and over space. So what we're seeing now is this is the National Phenology Network, which is the bloom effects across the country. And this shows a recent July 2020, and it's the status of spring. And in the Southeast, it was, and Northeast, it was up to 3 to 4 weeks earlier this year, and up to 3 weeks late in parts of so blue is late and red is early. So this was early spring and a later spring. So it's changing. And that'll affect migration. So this was a really cool study done by the Nature Conservancy that shows migration patterns and where species, and they went with mammals, birds, and amphibians, and there is the distribution and habitat needs in the Western Hemisphere versus land use and projected climate patterns. So these are places that animals are going to hopefully be able to move due to climate change. Because as the weather is changing and the temperatures are getting warmer, animals are going to either need to move further north in our hemisphere or higher up in altitude. So these are really complex, and I'm not going to be able to get into it in the next hour, but just wanted to go through it. So to summarize here, we want to keep it calm and not crisis. We want to invoke a value early on in our conversation. And then we want to provide hope. At NNOCCI, we like to think that we are agents of hope. So how do we do this? We do this by talking about solutions on a community scale. So, and they need to be local. So ideas, general ideas are alternative energy, going solar, wind. I've even heard of talk of harnessing the Gulf Stream off our East Coast. Not building in the coastal high hazard zone as sea levels are rising. We want to stay away from the edges, and vote for the earth. So how do we make this local? Here's an example of how I've made these local. I live in Manatee County, right? We're part of Sarasota. We're not part of, but we're right next to Sarasota. We're a group together. We talk about Ready for 100, which is a Sierra Club initiative that's in 166 cities now nationwide. Sarasota having signed on 2 years ago. And there's two groups here you can join. You can join Sarasota Ready for 100 or the Manatee Clean Energy Alliance in my county, who are both working with local governments to get them ready for 100% renewable. You can also join the Sarasota Bay Guardians, which is a group that goes out and does native plantings, coastal cleanups, different things that you can actually get hands-on locally and do this by contacting info@sarasotabay.org. And the last and most important, because coming up in just a month and a half, we want to all vote so we can change what's happening on a big level, because government is what makes the community solutions really happen. So I tell everyone, vote Earth. So ending with these positive things is a really helpful. Here are some communication sources. Climate Interpreter is our NNOCCI website. So climateinterpreter.org is a really helpful. There's some blogs on there, and there's also some training resources, and you can find the reframe cards there that I showed you. Volo Climate News is another one. Yale program on climate change communication is a really good resource. They do a newsletter into your inbox that's really helpful. Heated.world. Emily Atkin is a climate journalist, and she puts out 4 or 5 days a week. She puts out this heated column. It comes into your inbox. Some of them are subscription based, but she does at least 2 a week that are free. I highly recommend, if you're really interested, to get on her email list as a subscriber, because she talks about what's going on now in politics as well as policy, and really, really good climate journalism. So I also offer trainings. The NNOCCI, the national network, has done 2 online trainings this year. They're full at the moment. But if you're interested, I can also plug you in with them. And I kind of whizzed through it. So hopefully we have some questions, and I'm happy to answer anything you might have.
Hi everyone. I'm going to try and get my microphone a little bit louder here for y'all.
Should I stop sharing?
Yes, if you stop sharing, I'll put us back to gallery view. So there haven't been any questions in the chat yet. So
okay. So one question I get a lot is, how do you, if someone's saying something completely off the wall, how do you get them it was cool yesterday morning. How can you say the climate is changing? It was really nice out yesterday, which I should share some. I meant to throw in some of those photos from yesterday, because climate change has been giving us a lot of rain the last couple of summers. And some of the wildflowers right now are just totally awesome. So not all the effects of climate change are immediately negative. I can say, get out there and enjoy the wildflowers right now, because they're extravagant and beautiful. But getting back to how to change somebody who's saying it's warm, it was so nice and cool, how could things be changing? Yeah, you can agree with them. Yes, it was nice and cool, but have you thought about what's happening in the long term? And then talk about use one of your reframe cards, like your heat trapping blanket. So yeah, it was cooler yesterday, I agree, but that's part of a one time event where climate is happening over long term. And over long term, we've been changing our weather. We had more days over 105 degrees this summer than we have ever had, and that trend is supposed to change. So yeah, while I agree with you, let's think about other things that are going on as well. So kind of bridge and pivot is the term we use.
CJ Taylor asks, is the online training free?
No, so the NNOCCI network was funded for 10 years by the National Science Foundation, and that funding is over. So in order to keep going, we need to charge for the program. So I believe it's $249 for a 6-week course that I was a TA in the summer course. So what we do is we put our in-depth training, we've made it shorter. We're calling it a crashed course, because when I was trained in 2013, it was we met 3 times in person, and we did a lot of interactive work together, separately, but then posted work and were critiqued. So this is doing it online, meeting once a week, and then doing some actual work together. So there's a lot of feedback from your TAs and learning to do the programming. So yeah, there is a charge for that.
Pat Fling says that the St. Petersburg city of St. Petersburg is trying to change the ordinance that prohibits building multifamily buildings in the coastal high hazard zones, and they're doing a big PR campaign to mislead the public on this.
To mislead the public?
Yes, to allow for this multifamily housing
Interesting.
In high hazard zones.
That's really interesting. There is a new, in St. Pete, in Pinellas County, they just hired a resiliency coordinator. And that person is, I believe, in the mayor's office. Is it the city or the county? I'm not sure, but if you email me, KarenWildFL@gmail.com, I will find the contact for you, because that resiliency officer should be able to help you with that misinformation, because that's huge. That's really, and that speaks to climate injustice. Low-income housing in the coastal high hazard zone, when people are figuring out that that's not where we are going to be able to live in the next, could be as short as 20 to 50 years. So yeah, that's an issue.
We have a more practical question from Rhonda Mayo, who would like some sources from reputable sources. Sorry, guys. that show the changes in the climate over long periods of time. So like quick links, nice graphics, long periods.
Climate Central, which is part of the climate weather.com through Climate Central. The EPA has some really good graphics. If it's still there, I'm not sure. They took a lot of stuff down.
Wait, so you're saying Climate Central is weather.com, or are you saying
it's run by weather.com, but Climate Central, I think if you just Google Climate Central, you should be able to find it. I use their graphics a lot. Also, climateinterpreter.org, the NNOCCI network, should have some graphics available there as well. Although that's not a real, we're talking about reworking that website. It's not really user-friendly, so it's sometimes hard to find things. Climate Central is a really good one. And then Yale project, the Yale Climate, they have a couple of websites, the Climate Communications, and then there's another one through Yale. And also the IPCC, there's graphics available from them, which is the international panel that's a global through the UN. And that's where all the, when you hear about the Paris Accord, that was through one of the international panel on climate change meetings. So they meet, I think it's every other year. But the IPCC is a really good resource as well.
Okay, so I put the YaleClimateConnections.org, the ClimateCentral.org, and the IPCC graphics page in the link there.
Good.
So Pat Fling responds to the St. Pete issue and says, both the St. Pete and Pinellas have resiliency offer, but it's the mayor who's pushing this change in zoning.
Unbelievable. With the resiliency officer in his, I would really contact that resiliency officer and ask him the hard questions, because how can they do that when the science is clear? So yeah, politics is difficult.
Right, but often our policies are not enacted in a way that has anything to do with evidence or
exactly
science.
Exactly, which is why we need to vote for the candidates that are going to be doing, or at least say they're going to be doing it.
Okay, so I think how about we do some role playing a little bit? So
okay.
We have challenging discussions. So for example, Rhonda brings up, how do you suggest we respond to someone who thinks that by fighting climate change we're losing jobs? So I say, look, it's really nice that you care, Karen, about this stuff. I mean, you're just so nice to care about this kind of thing. But our economy cannot sustain the kind of harm that the things you're suggesting are going to cause to us. We're going to lose our place in the world.
Our economy can't sustain this. I'm telling you, the economy is nothing if nobody is able to live in the world. So and switching to a no fossil fuel economy has turned the tide this year, and it is actually more affordable to go solar than it is to go. The technology is there now. So switching to solar and other alternative energies are now more economically viable than staying with fossil fuels. So I believe the tide has turned. And I just thought of another really good website, thisspaceshipearth.org. Thisspaceshipearth.org is run by a colleague of mine at Ringling College of Art and Design and a futurist. And so these guys have a really good science and really good documentation of what's happening and how things can change. And the premise goes back to Buckminster Fuller, if anyone's familiar with him, who said, we are all, this earth is like a spaceship. That's our metaphor. And we are all passengers on this spaceship. And we have a finite amount of resources that we can use, just like you do on a spaceship. And they put out every year the date at which we use up the resources that will sustain us. And then at which point we're starting to use more resources that will make our time shorter. And it's for the first time this year, it was in July was the year we used up. It had always been in early August, and it moves up every year. So the more resources we're using, the shorter amount of time we have to live on this spaceship. So that's a really, really good science-based and future-based website.
So I'm going to continue with my...
Okay.
So, the world is a competitive place. The oil's in the ground. If we don't use it, some other country's going to use it, and we're going to be behind. It's going to get out of the ground, and we better use it for our advancement rather than somebody else.
That's an interesting perspective, but thinking about if that fossil fuel stayed in the ground, it would not be putting any carbon dioxide into our atmosphere. And it goes back to how are you going to live on an Earth that is unlivable with all these days over 105 degrees, in some areas over 115 degrees. And, all the things we've been seeing with increased, sea level is definitely going to be rising. So there's a lot more to it than just the burning of the fossil fuels, and other countries are aware of it as well. So the science is clear that if we continue to burn fossil fuels, we are not going to have an Earth in which to inhabit. I don't know if I really answered that, but I don't think that the economy equates because we are not going to have a habitable planet if we continue to burn fossil fuels, and if other countries continue to burn them. Nobody's going to be able to live. So we have to set the example.
I am having very many of these very challenging conversations, and I can imagine many of our members are having these very distracting,
Right, and that's it. A lot of that is, it's only about the economy, and you have to look at the whole big picture. It's not only the economy, and it's not only, the burning of fossil fuels. It's the result of burning the fossil fuels that is creating. All you have to do is look at yesterday's headlines: the fires in California, the hurricane that became a tropical storm that deluged Texas and Louisiana and the Florida Panhandle, all happening at the same time. And that is a direct result of climate change. The scientists are clear on that. And so who can extract the most fossil fuels because we need to beat them is creating more and more of this. And it's not a question. These things are direct results of burning of fossil fuels, and the burning of fossil fuels is stopping that is the only thing that's going to change it. We need to get the carbon keep the carbon in the ground, and then also get more of it back in the ground. So it's a multi-pronged effort that needs to move forward. And I just can't agree with your argument that just because the other countries are doing it, we need to do it. That's not helping anybody.
So Deb Swim would like to know, how do we talk about climate-related flooding in Florida? Can you run through some ways?
How do we talk about climate-related flooding? So the increased in temperature of the air is, now this is not one I'm super familiar with, didn't study for this question. So we're getting more, the sea level's rising, the temperature of the water is higher, it's in putting more energy into the storms. That's the science of it. So the warmer water is allowing more evaporation, more heat to fuel the storms. So we're getting more rain and increased intensity as well as durations. And there's different patterns that are in place in other parts of the country. When you talk about, California, and they knew the prediction the day before all those fires started, the weather was saying, we're expecting dry lightning. There is a weather system in place that is unprecedented, that's going to cause multiple lightning strikes throughout the state. Be ready for fires. I heard that on weather.com. And the next day, all those fires were there. Now, the one in LA was started by humans, but the rest of it was simple weather patterns. So as in Florida, getting back to your question, in Florida,
Karen?
and the, yep.
You like broke up there, so
Oh,
start again.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm talking too loud.
No, I don't think so.
As we have more heat in the Atlantic and the Gulf, in the oceans, it's feeding the storms that are occurring. So our afternoon storms that go out over the water then get bigger and heavier because there's much more energy out there. And also in the heat of the air, when the humidity's high and it's hot, you can't sweat. So we're getting a lot more heat-related illnesses because the sweat's not evaporating and cooling your body. So there's so many different, it boggles the mind. And that's why I'm not really able to answer you really clearly, because there's just so much out there. I'm not an expert in the science of it.
Okay, so maybe some specific examples. So, like, the king tides are directly in Miami, for example.
They're everywhere.
Okay.
They're everywhere, all throughout Florida, the king tides. And they're happening because of the heating of the oceans. So it's simple thermal expansion of the water. So getting back to when we burn fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas, we're adding excess carbon dioxide into the atmosphere that traps the heat into the air, which then comes to equilibrium with the water. Because the water's warmer, the molecules are moving and they're bigger. It's just simple science. And so heat expansion is making the oceans and sea level rise. Not to mention, the heating of the Arctic and the Antarctic is melting the ice that's land-based, and that's going into the water, and Greenland. All that extra ice is also raising sea levels. So king tides have always been, we call them the spring tide and the fall tide. They've always been there. But now, with 7 inches since 1950, at least in the Gulf, I don't know, Miami might be even more, then you have the spring tide on top of that. And now they're calling them king tides. That's a marketing, a way to market it so people are aware of it. They've always been happening in the spring and the fall. It's just now they're bigger because of sea level rise.
And so we're seeing that effect on, residential and commercial areas.
Sunny day flooding.
Yeah,
we're seeing it right here in Bradenton and in Sarasota. Sarasota, I don't know what they're going to do. They just redid US 41, and the water's coming up right where they redid US 41 right downtown Sarasota, and it floods every a couple times a year. So yeah.
So just for everybody, if you're unable to type in the chat, it probably means you're not logged into your Google account. And so feel free to text me your questions. I'm getting some text questions. So my number is 386-852-2539. So if you can text, you can send a question for Karen. So let's address Graham Scott of Cocoloba. He wants to address a climate denier assertion that's called obliquity, which is where the Earth is tilting on its axis. And if you're a climate denier, then you say that is causing that rotation, that tilting on the axis is what is causing all of global warming or global climate change. And so he would like for you to discuss that if possible.
Okay. I've not heard that specific query. And so I'd need to do some research on that. But that is clearly not what 97% of the climate scientists are telling us. So that may have some effect on the changing climate. However, the science is clear that burning of fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas is the number one driver of climate change. And we've been warned since 1888. The first scientist said, hey, with this industrial revolution, we're adding carbon dioxide into the air and it's going to start trapping heat. And then in the 1960s, the fossil fuel industry totally got it and decided in a marketing meeting that they were going to ignore that information and market the opposite. So it's clear, even if obliquity is happening, which I'm not sure about personally, but if you have heard that, that's fine. But that's not what's only causing climate change. The science is overwhelmingly clear that it's burning fossil fuels. So you agree, but you also tell them what you know in a calm, clear way. I hope that helped.
Thank you. Yes. I'll do some research while you answer the next question so I can
Thanks.
something on there. Madeline Mathis says, what about the environmental toll from extracting lithium and other materials used in the production of renewable energy? Aren't these resources that used in the production of renewables finite as well?
Yeah, they are. And we've got to work on A, other materials, and B, other ways of recycling. I live in downtown Bradenton. I had a guy living 3 doors down a couple years ago that was a recycler. And so he lived in that house for a year until he was evicted. And he left a trash of TV sets all over the front yard. He was mining lithium. So there are, I don't think that was a good way, and it was very wasteful, but he was mining lithium. He was collecting from e-scrap places and stuff like that and mining it. So there are answers, and you're right, we have to be aware of it, and we need to find other methods and other ways of recycling them. Because at this point, we have to stop fossil fuels.
So, of course, one of the ways to not have so much lithium is to, size solar panels and size other renewables so that you don't have to have so much storage capacity.
There's that.
That would be helpful. And of course, it would be helpful if we had, like, for example, cooperative energy companies, like, so that we could have a grid where you could give your neighbor energy when you're not using it. Right.
Yeah.
We don't have the implementation for that currently. We don't have the scale for that to be.
And it's illegal. You have to have everything go back to FPL in my area. So we need to work on our government to fix some of these solar issues. The power companies have way too much power. Technically you're not supposed to be off the grid at all in Florida. And that's just not right.
Okay, so Deb Swim suggests that we search global weirding for short videos to answer some of these confrontational questions.
Is that Catherine Hayhoe?
I don't know.
I don't know. Catherine Hayhoe, I should have mentioned her. She's an awesome climate scientist who is also a Christian, and she does some really great, I think she's the one that coined that term, global weirding. She does some really fantastic stuff. She's out of Texas. She's one of my heroes, so I apologize. I should have mentioned her as well as a resource. Catherine with a K, and Hayhoe, Hayhoe.
Hayhoe?
Yes.
Okay. I found her WordPress website. I am putting that in the chat here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she's a great resource. She helps with how to talk and what to say, and the science is clear. And that's basically, become familiar. And that's what we talk about in our workshops at NNOCCI. Practice, practice, practice. Take these, the reframe cards and just, and you can quote directly. That was the hardest part in the crash course I taught. Folks, a lot of them were fresh out of college or still in college, and you can't plagiarize, right? But with the reframe cards, please just read it. Regular carbon dioxide is used and created by normal life processes, but rampant carbon dioxide comes from burning fossil fuels for energy. We need to reduce rampant carbon dioxide. It's getting out of control. In a calm, reasonable tone, and know that climate science is 97% behind you.
Okay, so I have an email question from Stephen Provost, who asks if you can get a list of the Florida 100% renewable energy cities from the Sierra Club.
Yeah, it's Ready for 100. I think that is the website itself, through the Sierra Club. And they're pretty proud of that.
Okay. I see the list of commitments here.
Yeah, that's it.
So, I mean, nobody's made it, right? There's no cities that have made it to 100% renewable at this point. I don't know. And a lot of the ways they're doing it is kind of not as great as you would think. So Sarasota says they've bought into the FPL 100, so they're almost there. But it's like buying credits with other people using it. But at least it's a start. And so I don't know that anyone's actually gotten there yet, but they're getting there. And Sarasota's been working on it for 2 years. So their goal is to get their city operations. They think within the next 5 years, they can get their city operations totally. And then they want all their residents to be able to be 100% solar. Or not solar, but ready to go solar. Yeah. What does ready to go solar mean?
Ready for 100. So they want.
No. What do you mean by ready to go solar when you're saying residents ready to go solar?
Yeah, and I'm not sure what they mean by that. So I'd have to look deeper into that commitment. But I think the Ready for 100 site has a lot of those questions answered. Okay. So that's the Sierra Club.
Yeah, I posted the link in the chat, so people can see the list of cities.
They have a much more clarity of it because it's their program. I'm just I'm a naturalist, right? I know a little bit about a lot of things. Mm-hmm. But I don't know I know the science and I know my metaphors and how to talk about the communication. But when you ask specific questions, I may not have the complete scientific answer.
Okay, and I have a text question from Dennis Kieran, who asks, how do we address science deniers who say that it's all fake news, that it's all media hype, and that no one who talks about climate science can be trusted because
so the nature of science is that it is always changing, but there is very rarely a consensus like there is with climate scientists. So 97% of climate scientists agree, and you can look at peer-reviewed sources that are clear that it is happening because of the burning of fossil fuels. So it's not all fake news, and it's quite clear when you look at peer-reviewed research. It's very clear that it's burning of fossil fuels.
Dennis would also like to know if you are producing Vote Earth yard signs. You may have a market for that.
No, and our local CCL, so that's another group if you're interested in the carbon tax. The Citizens Climate Lobby has been working for 4 years diligently to get a tax on carbon. Our local group was talking about making some signs, but they were only going to do print your own kind of thing. So no, sorry, I don't have any, but maybe I should and bring in a little extra income.
So just to clarify, you're in Sarasota within city limits.
I'm in the city of Bradenton.
You're in the city of Bradenton,
which is in Manatee County. But our chapter is Manatee, Sarasota, DeSoto, and Hardee counties.
Serenoa chapter?
Serenoa chapter.
Serenoa chapter. And I am in Kissimmee, but outside of the Kissimmee city limits and within Osceola County, Pine Lily chapter. So we're moderately familiar with our own local issues, but I don't have a sea level rise connection very much because I'm inland, whereas you do.
Yeah, I moved. I had a home on Palmasola Bay. It was a family homestead that my husband and I bought. They had been living there since the 70s. And we lived there from 1984 until 2016, I sold it. Is that long ago? Yeah, 2016. So I raised 2 daughters on Palmasola Bay, and then I saw the science was clear. And I sold the house before people figured it out. So it's happening.
Pat Fling wants to chime in to talk about Pinellas County. She says the ready for 100 cities are St. Pete, Largo, Dunedin? Do you know how to say that?
Dunedin.
Safety Harbor. And then Deb would like to know, where can she buy or get the reframe cards? Do you have to attend the...
Send me an email and I will send you a link to them, or I can actually send them to you. It's on climateinterpreter.org. And I can help you get those. But if you go to climateinterpreter.org and search for the reframe cards, you should be able to get them.
What's your position on using example countries for countries that have not lost global status as first world countries? I know that's not politically correct.
With climate change?
Yeah, so countries that are transitioning to renewable energy but are not total disasters. They haven't
Canada? Canada's really moving forward. Germany, they were talking really well about Germany, but now they're talking about going nuclear again. So I can't agree with nuclear because the waste has not been figured out yet. So I'm not that sure. I'm not that up on the global status.
Okay, because a lot of the sort of really challenging discussions I get into are, this is how our country is set up, this is why we're successful, and if we change anything in order to modify our economy, we will become less successful, and we will become a has-been country, and we'll no longer be militarily dominant. This is sort of a theme in many.
Yeah, and I just it's hard to argue with those people because they just don't get it, and I think just the opposite. We are losing our status because we're backtracking on climate change, and we look like idiots. And so the economy is going to go gangbusters when we switch to renewables and start employing people in jobs that are going to be helping us go solar. So right now, I just can't fathom that argument.
Okay, so we'll probably need some sources for maybe estimates. Maybe there's some think tank who've done estimates on job growth for renewable switch.
Yeah. Again, I wasn't expecting all these economy questions, or I would have done some research. Yeah, I don't know. But I have seen some articles fairly recently that talk about how the going solar is now more viable than not.
Well, economically for an individual homeowner, right? In terms of home energy use and cost per kilowatt hour.
No, no, in order, in generation and the whole thing. And I don't recall where I saw that, but it's some new, Bloomberg has some really good article. The Bloomberg report has some really good climate information articles, and their business, and also Business Insider is another one where I've seen some really good climate information for if you're looking for economics.
Karen Guerin has a question, sharing your first name. Um, Karen, any idea how much global conflict is due to or has increased because of climate change?
Global conflict. Well, a lot of these conflicts are I mean, are based on wanting to get access to fossil fuels. So, yeah, I don't know the numbers, but I know that, a lot of this is about that. A lot of the wars are directly because. And now, are you saying because of sea level rising and I'm not quite sure how to answer the question.
I mean, she was just referring climate change, so probably, if you could attribute a famine to climate change, or if you could contribute.
Oh, okay. So what's happening?
Heat
Yeah.
stress or inability to farm certain crops or.
Oh, well, yeah. The whole
water shortages.
A lot of the Central American refugees that are coming through Mexico, with Donald Trump's wall is blocking them. He said, that is twofold. One is there's been a huge drought in that area, climate related drought, for like 5 years, where they can't eke out a living, and then they're moving into cities and getting in trouble. The governments are a mess. So yeah, that crisis right at our border is greatly affected by climate change. So that's one example that I know of.
Graham Scott, who is still texting me, says he wants to point out that there's a feedback loop inherent in the carbon dioxide increase in temperature and corresponding temperature increase in our atmosphere, that the permafrost is melting and thus is releasing additional methane, which is a more potent greenhouse gas with CH4.
Yeah. It's huge. You're absolutely correct. And that makes it much more imperative. We're seeing that happen now in Siberia. I just saw a picture of a sinkhole that formed this week in Siberia because of melting ice, and then all that methane escapes, and we're going to see more and more of that. Part of that is it's so crisis. I don't like to bring it up in my presentations, but you are absolutely correct. And and that brings me to another point of a benefit of taking a NNOCCI workshop, is we're all about social and emotional support. That once we know so much about these feedback loops and the terror of climate change, we're also there to support one another in a community of like-minded individuals that can help to stop this scariness, this trauma. It really is traumatic to read too much about it, because the reality of the science is really scary. Okay. So we need to work on local solutions so that we can change it and feel like we're doing something about it.
Okay, so a lot of these conversations are either digital or in person. They may be with people who are either not close to you and feel like they can say things that are not polite or very argumentative, or they are with people who are close to you and you're attempting to preserve that relationship. But people who are like myself and yourself, who are aware of the changes that are happening to our ecosystems and the global changes, we are feeling fear and concern, and we are aware of the potential problems and projections for our country and the world. And so, when we're having those discussions, how do you personally stay calm when you're having the discussion and you're not being listened to necessarily?
I just, at the point where I'm not it's clear. I've said what I needed to say. I just say we have to agree to disagree. I can't talk about this anymore.
But what if you
And
haven't
leave it.
reached that point where you're done? Like, what if you're still able to engage, but you can feel yourself getting, like you're not being understood, but the conversation is still happening? Do you have like breathing techniques, or do you meditate outside of this, or?
Yeah, I was just going to say deep breath. I just take a step back and try and get my mind to organize and remember the basics. And this goes back to practicing your metaphors and understanding what you want to say. So you don't just go blindly into a conversation with someone. You need to know what your tools are and how you're going to use them. And that gives you the confidence to remain calm. So it's just a matter of being ready for that conversation. And if you're not, you may just have to shut it down if you feel yourself getting excited, because it's the worst thing you can do is lose it. You're better off saying, I can't go there, I'm sorry, than to get angry.
Okay, I think we are, let's see. Oh, we have one last comment from Graham Scott. He says, recommends that everyone watch the movie Ice on Fire.
Haven't seen that one.
So I haven't seen it. I don't know anything.
Is that's the one about the feedback loop? I'm guessing.
It sounds like it is.
Yeah, Ice on Fire. I'll write that down. Thank you. Yeah, so the key is your tone, like we were just talking about. Knowing your tools, your metaphors, or however you want to talk, knowing what you want to say, knowing that 97% of climate science is clearly behind you. No matter what they say and how much they tell you it's fake news, you can say, it doesn't matter. The science is clear and it's not fake. It's peer reviewed and it's real. And then always end with a feedback of not a feedback, but a solution. What's happening in your community that somebody can do to be a part of the solution? Because that's the only thing that's going to give us hope, is that we can be a part of it. So I hope I helped. I hope I didn't muddy any waters. I'm trying to be clear. I'm trying to help you learn how to communicate, and feel free to send me an email if you have any questions or want to talk further.
Okay, so you're in the members only Facebook group. We have a forum too. So if you're not on Facebook, we do have a forum for FNPS. But so if you have questions, or you get some questions or conversations that are difficult, Karen has put her email in the chat. I mean, I have put Karen's email in the chat. So maybe we can have discussions in the Facebook group, or in person. Maybe we could do a workshop or something at the conference.
Okay, so I have nothing in my chat. I don't know why.
Oh no, you can't see the
I
chat.
can't, because okay. So if I missed what was the name of the movie that?
Oh, Ice on Fire.
Ice on Fire. I knew it had something to do with fire. Ice on Fire, because I really want to see that. So thank you, Grant. And yeah, I'd love to continue the conversation with anyone. If there's anything I can do to help.
So what to do next? We can be prepared for these conversations by looking at the resources that you provided, the Yale Climate Connections, IPCC,
Climate Interpreter.
The Climate Interpreter, and then engage in the conversations. Don't get upset, and contact Karen if you need to discuss further.
All right.
Okay. Thank you everyone for coming to another Friday Lunch and Learn. I really appreciate everyone's support. And let me know if you have any suggestions, or speaker suggestions, or content suggestions. And thank you for being a member of the Florida Native Plant Society. Okay.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Karen.